Guns N' Roses had their much-anticipated reunion concert at Coachella last night. Rumors about Axl Rose joining AC/DC were confirmed.
Axl Rose. To some, he's a rock star. Others might have just known him for his bands and songs. Rose is more than his career and legacy. He is a man who had his share of traumas, demons, ghosts, and tragic early life history. There is more to that spotlight, and it might break your heart. It's time to know Axl Rose deeper. Once there was an idol. Axl Rose was once the most electrifying frontman in rock music. At the height of Guns N' Roses' fame in the late 80s and early 90s, he was untouchable. This skinny, bandana-wearing Indiana kid with a 5-octave vocal range and a temper to match was the ultimate rock star. He had the voice, the looks, the presence, and that dangerous aura that rock legends are made of. Appetite for Destruction wasn't just a debut. It was a warning shot that this band was about to torch the music world. And they did, for a while. But the story of Axl Rose isn't just one of success. It's a slow unraveling, a tale of talent twisted by ego, trauma, and the impossible pressures of fame. His rise was meteoric, but his fall was almost Shakespearean. Somewhere between global superstardom and the ruins of Chinese democracy, the myth of Axl Rose transformed into something sadder and more complicated. It's easy to point fingers at Axl's notorious behavior. The late shows, the riots, the endless band member fallouts, those were part of the spectacle. He was labeled a diva, unstable, even dangerous. But behind that rage was a person deeply scarred. Axl's childhood was traumatic. He's spoken about abuse and instability that followed him into adulthood. That kind of trauma doesn't just vanish, it festers. It shows up in control issues, paranoia, and an inability to trust the people around you. For Axl, who suddenly found himself at the center of the most chaotic band in the world, those scars were gasoline on an already blazing fire. Guns N' Roses became a pressure cooker, and Axl needed control. He took over the band's direction, slowly pushing out original members, including Slash, the guitar god who was practically the other half of the GNR identity. For many fans, the band died when the classic lineup dissolved. But Axl kept going, holed up for years in studios, obsessively working on Chinese Democracy, a project that became more of a symbol than a real album. Delayed for over a decade, costing millions, and endlessly reworked, it was his attempt to reclaim the magic. When it finally dropped in 2008, it wasn't terrible, but it felt out of time. A relic of a war long over. The real tragedy, though, isn't just about music. It's how the same fire that made Axl great also burned everything around him. Fame magnifies everything. Your genius, your flaws, your pain. And in Axl's case, it pushed him to isolate, to mistrust, to lash out. He became a recluse, disappearing from the public eye for years at a time, popping back up on stage as a kind of mythic figure, older, heavier, still capable of moments of brilliance, but clearly haunted. And yet, there's also something deeply human about Axl Rose. He never sold out. He didn't pivot to pop or become a reality TV punchline. He stayed stubbornly himself, even when that self was messy, angry, and hard to love. In a weird way, Axl represents what happens when raw talent collides with trauma and an industry that chews people up. His story is tragic, not because he failed, but because he could have had it all. If only he'd found a way to escape his own demons. There's a sort of redemption arc, too. In recent years, the classic GNR lineup reunited, at least partially. Axl toured with Slash again. He even filled in as the lead singer of AC/DC when Brian Johnson had to step down, and by most accounts, he nailed it. Maybe it wasn't a full circle moment, but it was a glimpse of what could have been. Maybe Axl finally found a way to keep going without burning everything down. The tragedy of Axl Rose isn't just that he fell. It's that he was never really given the tools to handle the heights he reached. He wasn't ready for that kind of fame, and the people around him weren't able to save him from himself. But in that wreckage, there's still something iconic. He gave us moments that defined an era, an attitude, and a sound that still echoes today. And even in the chaos, maybe that's enough. But why did he end up as the person he was during those years? Weight of the past. Before he was Axl Rose, the snarling voice behind Guns N' Roses, he was just Bill Bailey, a kid from Lafayette, Indiana, growing up in a house full of secrets, confusion, and trauma. His story isn't just about rock and roll. It's about pain that started long before the stage lights ever hit his face. When you really look at his background, it's no wonder he ended up as intense and unpredictable as he did. Axl's past wasn't just hard, it was tragic, and it haunted everything that came after. His biological father, William Rose Sr., left when he was still a baby. Worse than just abandoning the family, he left behind a mystery and a wound that would never fully close. Axl's mother, Sharon, remarried a man named Stephen Bailey, and young William was raised under the name Bill Bailey, believing Stephen was his real dad. That lie alone is enough to mess with a kid's sense of identity. But what made things even worse was that Stephen Bailey was reportedly a strict, abusive, and controlling stepfather. Axl has spoken publicly about the abuse he endured growing up, including physical and, more disturbingly, sexual exploitation, some of which he claims happened when he was just 2 years old. The trauma he experienced wasn't just about pain, it was about betrayal. The people who were supposed to protect him were the ones hurting him. That leaves a mark that doesn't fade. It doesn't just affect your childhood, it follows you into adulthood, into your relationships, your mental health, and your ability to trust anyone. That early trauma helped shape Axl into someone who needed control. It makes sense, right? When you grow up in chaos, control feels like safety. And later, when he found himself at the top of the rock world, he clung to that control like a life raft. That's part of why he had so many conflicts with band members, record labels, and even fans. People saw him as a diva or a maniac, but a lot of it came from a place of fear and deep emotional damage. It's hard to collaborate when your brain is still trying to survive a war it never got closure from. Axl also struggled with his sense of identity. Learning as a teenager that his name was actually Rose, not Bailey, must have been like having the ground shift beneath him. Imagine being told your whole life was built on a lie, and then being expected to just carry on like everything's fine. That discovery led him to dig into the truth about his father, only to find out William Rose Sr. had died under suspicious circumstances in the 80s, possibly slain. That closed the door on any hope of closure or reconciliation. It was just one more wound that would never really heal. All of this bled into Axl's adult life. His relationships were famously volatile, especially with women. And while there's no excusing abusive behavior, it's clear that his early exposure to violence and dysfunction warped his ability to connect in healthy ways. He was emotionally unstable, sometimes violent, and often isolated. Fame didn't fix him. It just gave him more walls to hide behind. The tragedy of Axl Rose's family life is that it stole his foundation before he even had a chance to build one. He came into the world already carrying heavy emotional baggage. And then the world handed him a microphone and told him to scream. And scream he did. That rage, that pain, that raw, unfiltered emotion, it made him a star, but it also kept him trapped. For Axl, music was a lifeline, but it was never a cure. The demons didn't go away just because the crowd was cheering. In a weird way, though, the very thing that broke him also gave him his voice. You can hear that pain in every line of Welcome to the Jungle, in the anguish of Estranged, in the bitter fire of Coma. He turned his trauma into art, even if the process nearly destroyed him. And while he may never have found peace with his past, he made something unforgettable out of it. Today, Axl Rose is still a complicated figure. Flawed, reclusive, occasionally brilliant. But when you understand where he came from, it's easier to see the human being behind the legend. He wasn't just born a rock star, he was forged in pain, in confusion, in secrets that should never be kept. His family didn't just give him a name, they gave him ghosts. And he's been singing with them ever since. Despite the imperfections in his life, he was loved by his fans. The legacy of a rock and roll wild card. At his peak, Axl Rose wasn't just a singer, he was a force of nature. When Guns N' Roses exploded onto the scene with Appetite for Destruction in 1987, it was like a jolt of lightning straight through the heart of the music industry. Hair metal was big, sure, but this was different. Axl wasn't posing. He was snarling, sweating, screaming. His voice could go from a feral growl to a piercing wail in the span of a single line. He didn't sound like anyone else, and no one has really matched him since. But it wasn't just the voice. Axl had a presence. On stage, he was electric, pacing, twirling, whipping the mic stand around like a weapon. He had that dangerous, barely contained energy that made you feel like anything could happen at any moment. And often, something did happen. Late starts, on-stage meltdowns, full-blown riots. But even when he was testing everyone's patience, people kept coming back. Why? Because Axl Rose was real. He didn't put on a smile for the cameras. He didn't play the game. He was the game. Part of the love people have for Axl is tied to authenticity. He sang about real, gritty stuff. Addiction, alienation, rage, love, loss. There was nothing bubblegum about it. Whether it was the chaotic energy of Welcome to the Jungle or the tortured beauty of November Rain, he was giving you everything he had, emotionally and vocally. You could hear the pain in his delivery, the rawness. People connected with that. They still do. And then there's the fact that Axl never sold out. That might sound cliché, but it's true. He didn't chase trends. He didn't jump from one genre to the next to stay relevant. Instead, he locked himself away for years working on Chinese Democracy, a project so ambitious and over the top that it became a punchline. But even in that, there was a kind of twisted integrity. He didn't care what anyone thought. He was going to make the album he wanted to make, even if it took over a decade. That kind of stubborn dedication to his vision, no matter how chaotic, earned a strange kind of respect. Of course, Axl's legacy isn't just about the music. It's also about myth. He disappeared for years. He fought with basically everyone. He became the reclusive genius type, the rock star gone ghost. That kind of mystery just adds to the allure. When he finally did come back, whether it was with a new version of Guns N' Roses or shockingly as the frontman for AC/DC, it felt like a return of a legend. Fans didn't forget him. They were waiting. Because no matter how many years passed, Axl Rose was still Axl Rose. That name meant something. And let's talk about that reunion with Slash. For years, it seemed impossible. There was too much bad blood, too many burned bridges. But somehow, it happened. In 2016, the Not in This Lifetime tour brought Axl, Slash, and Duff McKagan back together. It was surreal. Fans who thought they'd never get to see the classic lineup again were suddenly reliving the dream. And Axl delivered. He wasn't just phoning it in. He was singing his heart out, proving that even after decades of ups and downs, the fire was still there. That's what makes Axl's legacy so powerful. He's not loved because he's perfect. He's loved because he's real. He's lived through hell, publicly and privately, and he's still standing. He gave voice to a generation that felt lost, angry, or just looking for something honest in a world full of fakery. And he never pretended to be a hero. He just was. Axl Rose represents a kind of raw, imperfect genius that doesn't come around often. His legacy isn't clean or easy to summarize. It's filled with drama, heartbreak, legendary performances, and infamous meltdowns. But through it all, he's remained a symbol of what rock and roll is really about: freedom, rebellion, pain, power, and not giving a damn what anyone thinks. And that's why people still love Axl Rose. His mysterious disappearance. As the frontman of Guns N' Roses, he was one of the biggest rock stars on the planet. And then, poof, he vanished. No new music, no public appearances, no interviews, just silence. So what actually happened? Why did Axl Rose disappear for so long? In the late 80s and early 90s, Guns N' Roses were untouchable. Their debut album, Appetite for Destruction, 1987, became one of the best-selling albums of all time. Songs like Welcome to the Jungle and Sweet Child O' Mine turned them into rock gods. But with the fame came chaos. The band was plagued with infighting, substance abuse, late shows, canceled gigs, and general rock star drama. Axl, in particular, got a reputation for being unpredictable and hard to work with. While Slash and other band members were pretty open about their issues, Axl was more mysterious. He didn't do many interviews, and when he did, they were often cryptic or confrontational. By the mid-90s, the original lineup started falling apart, and eventually, Axl was the last man standing in what was technically still called Guns N' Roses. After the dust settled, Axl seemed to retreat into his own world. He holed up in his mansion in Malibu and then moved into a high-security home in the Hollywood Hills. Rumors swirled. He was working on new music, a new band, or just losing his mind. The truth is somewhere in between. Axl became obsessed with crafting what would eventually become Chinese Democracy. This wasn't just another album. This was going to be a masterpiece, a reinvention, a middle finger to all the doubters. But his perfectionism spiraled into years of studio time, endless rewrites, new bandmates, and millions of dollars spent. Producers came and went. Musicians were hired and fired. The album was started and scrapped multiple times. People joked that Chinese Democracy would never actually come out, and for over a decade, they were right. Another big part of Axl's disappearance was personal. After everything that went down with the original Guns N' Roses lineup, Axl didn't trust many people. He kept his circle tight. Some say too tight. He became almost reclusive. Rare public sightings added to the myth. Sunglasses, long hair, and usually a scowl. He also had a very public battle with mental health issues, though he never spoke about it much. Fans and former bandmates speculated that trauma from his rough childhood, Axl grew up in a troubled, abusive household, and the pressures of fame had taken a toll. Instead of leaning into the spotlight like some of his peers, he pulled away from it entirely. When Chinese democracy finally dropped in 2008, after 15 years in the making, it was more of a curiosity than a cultural event. Some people loved it. Others thought it was overproduced and too late to matter. But either way, Axl had finally emerged again. He started touring with a new version of Guns N' Roses, and while it wasn't the same magic as the original lineup, the shows were big and loud, and Axl still had that voice. Then, in one of the most unexpected rock reunions ever, Axl reconciled with Slash and Duff McKagan. The Not in This Lifetime tour launched in 2016 and ran for years, becoming one of the highest-grossing tours of all time. Fans who thought they'd never see the classic lineup again were proven wrong. Layers of his life. During his late teenage years, Axl Rose was evaluated by a psychiatrist who concluded that his rebellious behavior was a sign of psychosis, ultimately diagnosing him with bipolar disorder. Interestingly, the same evaluation also noted that he had a high IQ. However, Rose later cast doubt on the diagnosis. In an interview, he explained that his only interaction with the clinic involved completing a 500-question test. Based on that, he was labeled manic-depressive and prescribed medication. Rose said the medication didn't help him handle stress. It only gave others the impression that he was trying to manage his condition. Despite his wild reputation, Rose wasn't heavily into substances. While he didn't completely avoid them, his use was relatively minimal. However, in 1986, overwhelmed by stress, he intentionally overdosed on painkillers during an argument, ending up in the hospital. That harrowing experience would later inspire the lyrics to the Guns N' Roses track Coma. In the early 90s, Rose became an advocate for homeopathic medicine and began undergoing past life regression therapy. During this time, he publicly revealed that he had recovered memories of being sexually exploited by his biological father when he was just 2 years old. A trauma, he said, stunted his emotional development. Rose also struggled with physical health issues while on tour, which he believed were the result of a kind of subconscious self-punishment. His body, he felt, was manifesting internal emotional distress. During the long and troubled recording of Chinese Democracy, Rose even hired a psychic who reviewed photos of potential staff members and read their auras to determine whether they should be hired. In his personal life, Rose began dating Erin Everly, the daughter of Don Everly from the Everly Brothers, in 1986. He wrote the iconic ballad Sweet Child O' Mine for her, and she appeared in the song's music video. The couple got married in Las Vegas on April 28, 1990, but less than a month later, Rose filed for divorce. They briefly reconciled, and Everly became pregnant. They chose names for their baby, Shiloh Blue for a boy, and Willow Amelia for a girl. But she tragically suffered a miscarriage in October 1990. This loss hit Rose hard, as he had hoped to start a family. Their relationship ended after another dispute, and the marriage was officially annulled in January 1991. Later in 1991, Rose started a high-profile and rocky relationship with supermodel Stephanie Seymour. She starred in the videos for Don't Cry and November Rain. Rose formed a strong bond with Seymour's young son Dylan, trying to be the kind of father figure he himself never had. The couple got engaged in February 1993, but broke up just 3 weeks later. In 2014, a study ranked Axl Rose as the world's greatest singer, based on vocal range. When asked about it, Rose responded with humility, saying that music taste is subjective, and he didn't consider himself the best. He named a wide range of singers he admired instead, including Freddie Mercury, Elvis Presley, Paul McCartney, Janis Joplin, Stevie Wonder, and others, many of them icons from the 70s. He specifically named Queen as his favorite band, and Mercury as his favorite vocalist. Outside of music, Rose has shown a strong interest in humanitarian causes. On April 28, 2015, he wrote a letter to Indonesian President Joko Widodo urging him to reconsider the use of the death penalty, particularly in the case of the Bali Nine. After two of the individuals were executed despite global protests, Rose publicly criticized Widodo for ignoring international concern. He's also been vocal about politics on social media, especially via Twitter. Rose has frequently criticized members of the Trump administration and other public figures, including Apple CEO Tim Cook. In 2020, he publicly condemned then-Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin for the U.S. government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, prompting a direct reply from Mnuchin himself. As a teenager in Indiana, Axl Rose had frequent run-ins with the law, being arrested over 20 times for various offenses. How did his situation end up like this? Troubles and lawsuits. In 1985, Rose and bandmate Slash were charged with statutory indecent assault after a 15-year-old girl, Michelle, accused them of sexual activity. The situation escalated after a dispute led the girl to flee the house naked. Rose described the incident as involving a hippie chick who wandered in and began damaging their equipment before storming out onto Sunset Boulevard, unclothed and disoriented. Rose had multiple altercations with law enforcement throughout his career. In November 1987, he was arrested on stage after allegedly assaulting a security guard during a concert. Although he was given the chance to apologize and avoid arrest, he refused. In 1990, he was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon after hitting a neighbor on the head with an empty wine bottle. Rose claimed the neighbor had provoked him, and their feud had been ongoing due to noise complaints. This incident inspired the Guns N' Roses song, "Right Next Door to Hell." Another major legal issue arose after the infamous Riverport riot in 1991, when Rose abruptly ended a show near St. Louis, triggering a violent reaction from the crowd. He was later charged with assault and property damage, fined $50,000, and placed on probation for 2 years. He also settled a separate civil lawsuit filed by a concert-goer for $160,000. Further incidents included a 1998 arrest at Phoenix's Sky Harbor Airport, where he was charged with disorderly conduct after allegedly threatening a security guard during a baggage search. His publicist described it as a misunderstanding involving a fragile keepsake Rose was trying to protect. In 2006, Rose was arrested in Sweden after biting a security guard's leg during a dispute in a hotel lobby. He was too intoxicated to be questioned at the time and was fined a total of $6,860, including damages to the guard. Throughout his career, Axl Rose has been no stranger to controversy, not just on stage, but in the courtroom as well. From turbulent relationships to business battles, Rose has faced a long list of lawsuits that highlight both the chaotic nature of his personal life and the high stakes of the rock and roll industry. One of the earliest and most public legal clashes came in the wake of his split from model Stephanie Seymour in the early 90s. The pair had been involved in a high-profile relationship, appearing together in several Guns N' Roses music videos. However, by 1993, things had turned sour. Rose accused Seymour of assaulting him at a Christmas party in 1992 and filed a lawsuit. Seymour responded with a counterclaim, alleging assault and battery on his part. Rather than dragging out the case in court, both parties opted to settle privately. Shortly after, in 1994, Rose's ex-wife, Erin Everly, filed a lawsuit of her own. She accused Rose of physical and emotional abuse during their relationship, which had already been the subject of public interest due to its intensity and eventual unraveling. Like the Seymour case, this one was also settled out of court, though it added another layer of drama to Rose's already tumultuous personal life. As his personal life made headlines, Rose was also fighting battles in the business world. In 2004, he tried to block the release of The Roots of Guns N' Roses, a compilation of early recordings from his pre-GNR band, Hollywood Rose. Unfortunately for Rose, the lawsuit didn't go in his favor, and the album was released. That same year, Rose teamed up with former bandmates Slash and Duff McKagan in an attempt to stop the release of Greatest Hits, a compilation album from their Guns N' Roses days. This legal move also failed. Later, Slash and McKagan filed a lawsuit against Rose over songwriting and publishing rights. Rose claimed the confusion was due to a clerical error made when switching publishers. Ultimately, the matter was resolved through a settlement, but it marked another chapter in the ongoing tension between Rose and his former bandmates. In 2010, Rose was sued by his former manager Irving Azoff for $1.87 million in allegedly unpaid fees tied to touring. Rose fired back with a countersuit, accusing Azoff of deliberately mishandling the band's affairs to pressure him into reuniting with Slash and the original Guns N' Roses lineup. Once again, the case didn't make it to trial. The parties settled, and Rose later revealed that part of the deal required his band to perform a series of shows promoted by Azoff's company, Live Nation. Also in 2010, Rose filed a $20 million lawsuit against Activism, the makers of Guitar Hero 3. He claimed the company violated an agreement by featuring his former bandmates Slash and Velvet Revolver in the game after licensing Welcome to the Jungle from him. The case was thrown out in 2013 after the court determined that Rose had waited too long to file, missing the statute of limitations. In 2014, Rose once again took legal action, this time over early recordings from his old band Rapid Fire. He managed to stall the release by threatening legal consequences, delaying the tracks from reaching digital platforms. A more unusual legal move came in 2016, when Rose attempted to have an unflattering photo of himself removed from the internet. The 2010 image, which became a viral meme captioned, "OMFG Axl Rose is fat," prompted Rose to file a series of DMCA takedown requests with Google. Instead of burying the image, the attempt only drew more attention to it, an example of what's often called the Streisand effect. That same year, Chris Pittman, a former keyboardist for Guns N' Roses, sued Rose for $125,000 in unpaid wages. As with many of Rose's legal disputes, this one was also resolved privately within a few months. Most recently, in November 2023, Rose was sued under New York's Adult Survivors Act by former Penthouse pet and actress Sheila Kennedy. She alleged that Rose had sexually exploited her in a hotel room back in 1989 after they met at a nightclub. Kennedy had previously mentioned the incident in her 2016 memoir and in the 2021 documentary Look Away, which focused on abuse in the music industry. Rose's legal team strongly denied the allegations, calling the claim fictional, and filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit in early 2024. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching.